realizar en caso de presentarse una contingencia. El recinto cuenta con sistema de alertamiento sísmico, sistema contra incendio como extintores, detectores de humo e hidrantes, así como botiquín de primeros auxilios. Se cuenta con 2 salidas de emergencia, el acceso principal es una y en la zona media del lado derecho se encuentra la otra. Identifique la ruta de evacuación, zonas de menor riesgo y punto de reunión. Mantenga despejados los pasillos, escaleras y salidas de emergencia del recinto. En caso de activarse la alerta sísmica, conserve la calma, permanezca en su lugar y siga las instrucciones del personal. En caso de incendio, mantenga la calma y evacúe el recinto siguiendo las instrucciones. Si requiere atención especial, indíquelo al personal del staff del evento. En caso de evacuación, diríjase al punto de reunión de manera ordenada y en silencio siguiendo la ruta de evacuación señalizada. Gracias.
Buenas tardes.
Ahora sí.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Pues vamos a dar inicio si les parece bien. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas todas y todos a esta segunda parte de nuestra conferencia anual del capítulo México de ICONS, en coordinación ahora con el Instituto de Investigaciones Jurídicas, a quien le agradecemos en la persona, obviamente, de la doctora Mónica González Contrón. Nos acompaña ahora por un cambio último de agenda, pero le agradecemos muchísimo que nos acoja nuevamente ahora en esta oportunidad, como lo han hecho en otras ocasiones, en otros años, prácticamente desde que se iniciaron estos ejercicios, y por lo tanto pues es un regocijo poder estar nuevamente aquí. Desde luego agradecer a Andrea Pozas, a Camilo Saavedra, lo haremos ya en su oportunidad de manera más enfática por esta organización, y a todos los presentes, quienes están aquí, quienes nos ven en vía remota también, por su presencia, por su participación. En esta ocasión pues tenemos invitadas de verdadero lujo para poder desarrollar nuestra mesa de seminario, que es el formato que hemos pensado para esta ocasión. Muchas gracias por estar aquí, muchas gracias Cristina Lafont, profesora Lafont, por estar aquí, muchas gracias doctora profesora Nadia Urbinati por estar con nosotros. Son verdaderas voces líderes globales en torno a los temas que vamos a tratar el día de hoy. Bueno, me parece necesario hablar de la oportunidad, de la ocasión que tenemos para México en esta conversación, en estas conversaciones en general, pero tenerlas a ellas para poder desarrollar sus ideas, pues es un verdadero lujo, como digo. Por lo tanto, solamente me correspondía solamente agradecimientos y presentación, pero también voy a robar unos minutos para hacer algunas referencias curriculares de las profesoras Lafont y Urbinati. Creo que es muy importante tenerlas presentes para iniciar justamente, abrir el debate, abrir la discusión, abrir la reflexión sobre la crisis de la democracia representativa. En especial, obviamente, en el contexto de este libro que ellas van a presentar en la tarde, pero que tendrá referencias necesariamente también ahora. La profesora Cristina Lafont, como todos sabemos, su investigación actual se centra en cuestiones normativas de la filosofía política relacionadas con la democracia y la participación ciudadana, la gobernanza global, los derechos humanos, la religión y la política. Es coautora precisamente, junto a Nadia Urbinati, de Logocratic Mentality, Defending Democracy Against Logocracy, precisamente en 2024. Es autora de Democracy Without Shortcuts, del 2020. Hablamos ya de este libro, por cierto, en alguna otra oportunidad, justo después de la pandemia, me parece, en el capítulo de México, justamente de ICONS. The Linguistic Turn in Hermeneutic Philosophy, de 1999, Heidegger, Language and World Disclosure, del año 2000, y es coeditora de Critical Theory in Critical Times Transforming the Global Political and Economic Order, de Columbia University Press del 2017 y de Habermas Handbook del 2017. Solamente por dar algunas referencias obviamente bibliográficas de la profesora Lafont. La profesora Urbinati, doctora en el Instituto Universitario Europeo de Florencia, es una teórica política especializada en pensamiento político moderno y contemporáneo, así como en las tradiciones democráticas y antidemocráticas. Codirigió el seminario de la Facultad de Pensamiento Político y Social de la Universidad de Columbia y fue coeditora junto a Andrew Arato en la revista académica Constellations, an International Journal of Critical and Democratic Theory. Es miembro del comité ejecutivo de la Fundación Reset Dialogues on Civilization y de la Fundación Feltrinelli en Milán. Pues, thank you very much, Professor Urbinati. Muchas gracias, profesora Lafont, por estar aquí. Y simplemente ahora le paso la palabra a Andrea para poder ya iniciar justamente la mesa de debate.
It's really a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much. And so we will give you the table so that you can present, and later on we will have some interaction and comments. So please.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us. We are so happy to be here. I'm speaking in English because I think that way Nadia can understand better, although she does understand some Spanish.
I understand Spanish very well,
but
not.
Yeah, she cannot speak it, so I think it's easier to include her. But otherwise, I would love to speak Spanish. So, whatever, if necessary, we can do that too. Okay, so I'm always first to talk, but I'm going to give a little bit of a view, my view of how the book came about, and then Nadia will give hers. Is that okay? So basically, we both are worried, and our work before this book was about the crisis of democracy. And speaking for myself, I'm very worried about the real chance that democracy may disappear from the face of Earth. We live in the US. We are very, very worried there. And the motivation for this book in particular was that I have been looking at what are the most promising reforms, proposals, what can we do in light of the deep crisis that we are experiencing right now. And in my previous book, In Democracy Without Shortcuts, it was a reflection on the surprise of seeing that most of the proposals for reform that are reactions to the crisis were actually tempted by what I call their shortcuts, by trying to get some results and then being actually willing to sacrifice democracy for the sake of these tempting results. And I was trying to show that first, sacrificing democracy is intrinsically not a good idea, and that in terms of outcomes, you cannot get outcomes without democracy, and that this is really just an illusion. And among those possible shortcuts, one was the autocratic one. And so we came together because we got the impression that what was special about autocracy compared to the other shortcuts that I was discussing, I mean, the shortcut of technocracy is as old as democracy, right? We can see a variation of the idea that those who know should be the ones ruling already in Plato, right? So it's as long as democracy has been, the temptation of having the experts rule. So nothing really new about it, all the way from Plato to Jason Brennan. It's exactly the same arguments. It's nothing new there. However, autocracy really is new. And a big difference with expertocracy, we want to call it that way, is that it does look much more democratic. In fact, people working in favor of having citizens' assemblies organized by lottery, randomly selected, etc., really are driven by a kind of democratic intuition and temptation or idea, right, that we need in this time of crisis to have ordinary people being able to influence policy, right, to be able to get there and do the job that politicians are not doing, right? So the drive is very democratic. And in fact, as we try to show what is special about the book, compared to like the little I said about autocracy in the other book, is that we got to analyze exactly what are the ideas behind what we now call the autocratic mentality. What is it that looks democratic, but we think, in fact, turns out not to be as democratic as it seems, right? And we came up with this analysis that we do in the book about the view of representation, which is really new. And then the weird way in which this populistic view of representation, as we call it, actually fits well with technocracy, which is very unusual. Populism and technocracy typically do not mix, right? They are the absolute opposites. When it comes to lotocracy, interestingly enough, actually they become kind of compatible and kind of reinforcing one another. And so we go into the analysis of the view of representation as embodiment that is a populist view. So the view, if you think of it in general terms, is not new. What is new is to apply it to something like a random sample, right? Usually the idea was that the leader in the traditional populism, the leader embodies the people, right? And the enemies of the people are those who may be in power, the elites, but they do not really represent the people because they are not like them, okay? So this idea of being like the people, in the case of the leader, is problematic because a lot of people will not see themselves politically represented by that leader. So it's much easier to recognize the wrongness of the claim that you are being represented if you don't share the political views of the leader, right? In the case of a representative sample that is kind of stratified and is supposed to be as a sample representing pretty much mirror society, it's much harder to see why that's not really representative in the way in which the leader may not be, right? But in fact, the operation, that view of representation, has the exact same problems as it has in populism when it's understood in the traditional way. And what it does, and we try to argue in the book, is that the anti-democratic element is that it provides that very sense of trust, that you can trust people that are like you, and so you can let them make decisions for you. You don't need to be an agent. You don't need to exercise your political freedom because those people who are like you will just make the decisions instead of you. And it justifies a rule by the few, by the very few. I mean, if you look at a citizen assembly, you may have 200 people, but this is not going to represent 300 million like in the United States. I mean, this is really ruled by the few. And so all the proposals that we should trust citizens' assemblies to make decisions for us because they are like us, they are going to decide like us, they are not part of the elite, it just shares that same populistic idea that the citizenship is homogeneous and that if it weren't for the elites, the enemies of the people, we all want the same thing. We have the same view of what is the common good. And that is what makes it compatible with the technocratic idea, because the idea is that once it's clear that we all want the same, right, then it's only a matter of technically finding out the means to get the goals, right, because we share the goals. So then it doesn't matter. Any sample of the population can do it, right, because it's actually basically the same thing. And so then, interestingly enough, citizens' assemblies where those people who are like you have the essential difference that they get informed, that they get to deliberate with one another, that they get to become more experts on an issue than you are, right? Because you have not been informed and you have not deliberated with diverse people, right? These people who, in theory, were like you initially, at the end of the process, are much better than you. They are really comparatively experts. And so it kind of like, if you get into the lotocratic mentality, you get into, again, justifying that very technocratic view that it is okay if some other people rule instead of you, so long as they have been informed and have deliberated. And that's why, funnily enough, it's exactly like technocracy, and it kind of gets together. We show how it doesn't actually work. Technopopulism really does not match, because it's two lines of justification that are incompatible with one another. So in fact, lotocrats have to choose which way they are going to justify, whether the fact that they are better than you or the fact that they are like you. They cannot be both. And so eventually they have to become either technocrats or populists, but it's an unstable view. But we think it's dangerous regardless of whether ever anything as radical as a lotocracy like Alex Guerrero is proposing, right? It's very radical. A lot of people don't think it makes any sense, wherever, dismantling elections, parties, everything. Even if that never happened, the real problem for us is the spread of the mentality, the licensing the idea that it is democratic to think that you don't need to be an agent politically, that you can let others rule for you. That permission of thinking that that can be democratic, to us, this is a way of dismantling democracy even further, right? Regardless of what happens institutionally, whether citizens' assemblies go anywhere or maybe disappear in 20 years or something. So that's kind of how I will describe it.
Well, I come from a tradition of scholarship that is connected to the study of democracy and representation. In particular, I started with a book on representation and then another on disfigurement, who Cristina criticized. We had this kind of interesting dialogue. And then the one on populism. For me, representation has been always a key to understand democracy through election, because otherwise, because either he is a form of delegative power and thus a form of oligarchy, if you want to say so, so simply we elect and then we go home and this is, or there is an issue for representation here, and thus whether representation is not a substitution for participation, but is a different way of being part of the political community, of the democratic community. That has been my interest before reaching lottery. Then, in my view, as Cristina also was saying, this issue of plutocracy comes from within the rediscovery of representation inside of political theory, particularly in the American case. I don't know about your environment. Well, not only American, but also British case, let's say, continental stuff. It is based on the reanimation, if you want to say so, renaissance of interest in representation, as if democracy meant indeed to create forms of representation. Then the question was, what kind of representation? So, because, and the book of Manen, we know everybody the book of Bernard Manen. So the question is how to select the representatives. If you select the representative with your will, your choice, that is, you are mobilized as an agent with your autonomy, with your inferences, your biases, your links to society and the interests of society, then representation becomes a form of separation between me and those who are there in my name, who can do better than me, perhaps, what they are supposed to do. Or you have instead a conception of representation that is simply selecting the persons that is going to play the role. This is what Manen would say. So in this case, election is simply to elect those individual persons who are supposed to replace us where in the institutions where decisions are made. So there are two conceptions of representation. One connected to society and the constructions of projects, the constructions of a prospect of what the country could be, and thus very articulated in society with parties, movements, and so on and so forth. Or representation instead is identified with the selections of those who are supposed to play in the division of power, in the division of labor, the role of lawmakers instead of us. This comes from the Madisonian tradition. So these are very different, and according to Manen, one of the two is truly characteristic that needs to interest us. The one that selects those who are supposed to be salient in something or different from us, and thus capable of doing what we are not able to do. This is the notion of elections as creating an aristocracy, right? So for this reason, he says, well, this cannot be democratic, right? So if we want to understand the way in which democracy selects and democracy creates representations, we have to not go that way. And indeed, he went back to the ancients and the Athenian case in order to show that there is another way for a democratic community to select. The other way is through lottery. So lottery has been identified as the democratic way of selecting. Selecting an organism of people, a committee or a judge or a jury, a collective of people, without introducing the element of the will, and thus the element of preferences, and thus the element of partiality. So selection thus by lottery has something that is democratic according to this tradition, that is impartial, impersonal, not connected to the choice but to chance instead, And thus it has the ability, and this is connected to rotation because by itself is not enough, the ability that everybody, each of us, can serve in that committee and be sorted. So each individual is indifferent to another one in relation to what it can do, and thus the only moment of individual expression of the will in this tradition is that when the citizens propose themselves as potential members of this basket where from the sortition can come. That is the only moment of the will operating. Otherwise, this is not there. Now, why to use this today? Why to retrieve today that tradition? That was for us an interesting topic. How to think that democracy can do away with agency, which means autonomy, which is freedom, and instead is a question of selections that should be completely indifferent to the different opinions or interest or cacophonic society that we have. So there are some important desires circulating inside of this mentality. First of all, the antipathy with conflict, let's say so. They really don't like conflict. Conflict is a kind of recognition that something is wrong. So a good democracy, this is a long tradition. Cristina mentioned Plato. Yes, it goes unanimity, homogeneity. This kind of, if a decision is good, why there are different opinions around it? So that it's an issue that always bugs inside of the democratic theory, and the autocrats are very good, the radical one, in showing that if you want really to select a group of people who are impartial, who are based on simply their own, ordinary common sense, like all of us, the better way is to eliminate all competitions. So competition is negative. So that is something that is good if you do it in some particular domains, justice, or some branches of the administrations. Why not? It's important, actually, because this element of impartiality and not to be connected to the issue to be discussed, like in a jury, is very important. But it's not important that you have to write a law, or when you have to connect or to create a proposal for then to become a kind of a law. So we discuss these different interpretations that at the end of the day, they take us far away from democracy, although in the name of democracy. So it is a kind of desire of perfecting democracy from within by taking away the reason why democracy was born. Since the beginning, that is to find a way to keep together different people, assuming that they are equal on something but not in everything, and that something becomes crucial in creating political power, because isonomia and isegoria are something important, the right to be equal to the law and under the law, and to be equally capable of expressing and thus participating. This equality presumes differences, doesn't presume identifications. It's not a guardianship. So this means that the selections method and the representative method in a democracy should be connected to this tension between a desire of coming to a decision that is good for most of us, for the large part of us, and yet the assumption that there is a disagreement on that, and this disagreement is part of this game. It's not a kind of defect or something to be amended. So in my view, at least as far as I see it, lottery is an attempt to amend the democracy more than be consistent with democracy. In amending it in that element that keeps the game without a final solution always. So for this reason, aside from the technical nuances of these different views of autocracy, we analyzed three of them. The radical one, which is substitution with the two elections, which is absolutely the total exit from democracy. Another one, very problematic either, the other one is like working on the same level as if the sovereignty were made of two, the sovereignty of chance, if you want to say so, or the sovereignty of choice, like that. And one chamber selected by lottery and another one selected by election. So, and the third one we call the auxiliary, which is perhaps the most manageable one, because it can be actually helpful in some domains, in some circumstances, and for some specific issues. Yes, it is useful to rely upon these citizen assemblies selected by lottery, but without the theoretical assumption that lottery or lotocratic democracy is a way of amending electoral democracy, because this is the goal. This is the basic common to all our friends, the theorists of the lotocratic mentality. I stop here.
Wonderful. So thank you very much. So the way we thought this gathering is to have, in a sense, a seminar so that we can all talk. So I will start just opening with a brief general comment. I have several more, but I will start with one, then I will open so that we can have a real conversation. And if I have time, I will tell you the other ones, and if not, maybe tomorrow or later on. So the first thing I want to say is that I find sorry, I find your book extremely interesting, not only as a response, and I think this discussion is important, not only as a response to the lotocratic mentality and lotocracy in itself, but also as the possibility to really think deeply whether or not we want to maintain representative democracy, and what is good about it, if we want to maintain it. And in that sense, the book is much broader than only the response to lotocracy. It's really, we need to start thinking about why do we want, if we want, constitutional representative democracy. So in that sense, while reading you, I was thinking there is an argument that I couldn't find in the segments that you sent us. Now I have the book, but I just got it. So, and I don't know if it's present in another part of your work, but I think it's crucial. And it comes, I think the way I understood your main argument is coming from democratic theory. And so what you are saying is the substitutive and the radical lotocracy project and mentality is a way of getting the few ruling. And we like the first, or one of the things we renounce with this project is the possibility of accountability of those who govern to the governed, to the citizens. And while reading you, I was very concerned with another way of accountability, that is also the accountability the representatives play, not only to the citizens, but to make other powerful political agents accountable. In particular, the role they play in a system of checks and balances. And I was thinking that one central problem of the lotocratic, these substitutive views of lotocracy, is that they also give that they renounce to this in a way that is not very explicit, but I think is very worrisome, at least to me. So coming from, I do mainly constitutional law, and coming from there, I found that very much that if we have people that are elected, few for a very brief period, we end up having, much like Montesquieu view of the judiciary in the English Constitution, that could not play a role in checks and balances precisely because there were juries that were sorted and they were not permanent, and therefore they didn't have the backing of any real power of society. They didn't represent a class like the lords or a group. And therefore, the problem I see is that if we assume this project, we would end up with citizens that we would not with a legislative that will not be able to actually play any role in the system. Another way of seeing it, and I found really interesting this was, and I will quote a part of the book. You say, the problem is that once parties are disconnected from the electoral forms of accountability, they would create the following dilemma throughout the police. They would either constitute an arbitrary systems of political influence or activate a censorious and repressive system of government. So parties, once that they are disconnected from electoral form, the way I read this is they become factions. Factions very much in the sense of political theory. And factions, one of the main premise of a pluralist conception of society is that we can give away parties, political parties in the modern sense, but we cannot have a society without factions. Factions are inherent to any society. And therefore, if there will be factions, because that's the way societies are, and autocratic assemblies have no structural capability to organize the citizens' power to face these factions. Paradoxically, this autocratic project will empower special interests, will empower oligarchs, and we will end up without any possibility to counterbalance that power. So this first general comment will be if it makes sense, like I would say constitutional interpretation or addition to your argument, and to what extent do you think the autocratic project is not seeing the importance of constitutionalism, not only the importance of democracy, but of constitutionalism. So that will be my first comment, and I don't know if you want to react, or we can open the table for others, and if I have time, I can say more.
May I say something? This is extremely important. I think you touch on an issue that perhaps was not so much developed in our book. It's true, because we are not constitutional and stuff. So, but that is interesting for one reason that you mentioned that is crucial, that has to do with the wide division of power. Why do we need checks and balances? Well, we need the classical, the authors, we need checks and balances because societies is a plurality of interests. So unless we don't zero the interest, and so we don't create the unanimous demos, right? We need to understand how to govern the parts of society. And to govern the part of society means that you cannot repress those parts of society. You have to make possible that their factions, their interests, they are filtered and they become a political within the sphere of public opinion formation, as we know, they become parts of the constructions of a political dialogue among us, right? So when you do so, at this point, you need to have a system that is very precise in dividing the spheres of political actions inside of the country, that is lawmaking, the executive, and so, and you need to understand the relationship between that government and the society. So you need to presume within, in this gap, that there are institutions, not inside of the state, but outside of the state, that are capable of, without solving the problem, to keep in dialogue these states, organization with the society. Now, without election, this cannot be possible. Elections are an important strategy for making possible, one, the articulation of this pluralism, otherwise they become factional, one against the other one. Well, we know the history of republicanism at the beginning of modernity, humanism. Machiavelli, go to read the Florentine Republic, is a fight among factions because they didn't find a way of solving these issues, of putting together distinctions without suffocating them and without making them dominant one against the other one. So elections has this power, but it has this power not because we elect individual lawmakers or individuals rulers, as in Lebanon, but because we elected through them something more than that. So elections is a political reorganization of society. And to do so, you really need to have a consistent institution of accountability. Of course, accountability is always imprecise because it's apart from that, it is a category coming from private law. I mean, it's very complicated to apply it to a public organization of state. We know that is complicated. But yet the sense that they are accountable to us, they are talking to in our names, that is what makes the quest for accountability, even if it is a little bit weak from the point of view of juridical clarity, and normativity, it makes sense to that. And this can be created by an institution like elections, but not by lottery. Lottery is supposed to not have accountability. Not have, because if you have accountability, you have a relation to the people. If you have a relation to the people outside, you allow people to influence you. At this point, the assembly of sorted is a very partisan assembly inside of it. So the paradox is that for me at least, although the autocratic mentality is a redescription of the entire society, in which the constitution makes no sense. Why you have to write the division of power makes no sense. Makes no sense at the end, because it is the moment of plural interests contesting each other or conflicting each other, and thus accountability through election that is not there. So that is my answer to your excellent point for me.
May I say something? No, I mean, we agree with so much in the book, but I mean, it's fascinating. The first thing you said about how the book is really not just criticizing the autocratic mentality, but about somehow having to make clear what is good about democracy. And so it's very funny that you will say that, because we are realizing that. So it's our next book project. We are going to write a book defending electoral democracy in the precise sense of making clear why it matters democratically, and not in so many other ways, not even accountability, consent, all the traditional ways of saying why electoral democracy matters. We disagree with them. We think that that's why the autocrats are winning the argument, because those views of why democracy matters democratically are so weak that people are really willing to give them up because it doesn't look so valuable. So that's exactly our next book project. And so it's fine, because it has happened already that people react to us saying, no, but in fact, that is typical. Of course, you cannot beat something with nothing. And so obviously when you criticize something, you are drawing from somewhere. Obviously, it's just that we weren't explicit about it, we weren't thinking about it. Now it's more obvious to us. Like we have to do the next step of saying, look, this is what we are risking. And your intuitions about what we are risking, I completely agree. The problem with accountability, the problem is that with the pure substitution model is so radical, so absolutely not related to anything that has to do with how we understand democracy, that it's hard to imagine how it will work in practice. Mm-hmm. But our impression is that people who have been individually randomly selected, if they had to handle the fact that there are factions in society, that people have different interests as a matter of fact, and different views about what we want to do, they will have to reproduce parties. They will have to obviously come together, those who think that actually this is the right way and those who think that it isn't. And they will have to talk to people outside. But that will mean that eventually they just become elected representatives. Whether or not they were elected is irrelevant. The fact is that they will have to be in contact with society, right? They won't be able to. And once they are, the whole promise about what was so special about them, precisely they were not accountable because they did not have an agenda, because they were impartial, and because they were part of the constituent power. That's the problem. It is that they are there as citizens. And we citizens, when we vote as we see fit. No one tells us what to vote for. We vote in secret, and we vote one by one. I am a part of the constituent power. I decide how I vote. If that is how it's supposed to work, I cannot be accountable. What will it mean that some people come to me and make me accountable for my vote? It's like, no, I'm exactly like you. I'm part of the constituent power. So it's not a matter of how could we bring in accountability. You can't bring in accountability. It makes no sense, right? And once you don't have it, then I don't know what you have. But certainly, division of power makes no sense. A constitution makes no sense. Like that, I don't know what it will be, really. Frankly, it's hard to imagine a autocracy in practice, but we will be losing all of it. That's how strong we feel about it. So.
May I, this is very a creative moment now. I feel some brightness inside coming from you. Thank you. No, okay, so imagine to have an assembly like us, sorted, right? Selected by sortition. The issue of the assembly since the beginning, since the French Revolution, was how can we sit? Where should we sit? That is the occupation of space. Because if I sit close to you, that you come from middle class, and I see, we become close and we exchange opinion. We are not silent and mute, right? So the position inside of the assembly is crucial. So let me see, if you are a woman chosen by 1 instead of 10, as you could have been chosen, but since you are a minority, if you want your position to have a say in the assembly, you want to ally with somebody stronger in numbers at least. So you create alliances, you create parties, you side ones against the other one, or you create parties again, you know, which means that democracy is exactly the problem of taking side and be on one side. Partecipare in Latin means to be part and to side with and not without. So makes two things, it means two things. And this is also a spatial issue, it's a question of space. The construction of an assembly is the most important thing you can imagine in a parliamentary system. We know where the right, the left, why there is this separation, why they don't sit casually here and there, they sit together, because they want to be a part, clearly, no? They are not, but in the assembly of selected by lottery, you cannot do that, because as soon as you put them together, you have to change their position every day, or every time you understand that somebody are alliance, so you cannot create discourse together. You have silence here, because if I talk to you,
but you will not, because you decide that majority rule. So you have to actually, inside assembly, you have to reproduce what we know from, and that's my impression, but it's hard to say because there has been no autocracy in the world, so we don't know. And I suppose a autocrat will say, no, it will be very different, so you don't have a knockdown argument, but if you think through, frankly, it's hard to avoid the impression that it could not work in any other way.
None of them tell us how they construct the assembly. For instance, some of them tell us how much they have to talk, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Others, whether the more shy people have the chance to be silent without feeling, out of place, because in a political community to talk is not easy, you know. Sometimes some people are shy, sometimes they don't, other people don't have the ability. So they say, well, that assembly is fantastic because it doesn't impose on any people to talk. So we give some information, they develop information, they read, they ask questions, they want to clarify. So to creating the discourse in the assembly is really an issue.
No, and also what you were saying, the fact that you are rotating.
Yep, you're rotating.
So next month, the next group of people show up and decide something else. Of course, they never explain who decides the issues to be decided. If they were to say that it's a random assembly, that random assembly will have all the power in the world. I want to be in that one. I don't want to be in the others. I want to be in the one that sets the agenda. I mean, come on. They don't say anything about that. So the agenda is kind of flies from heaven, or you have to have a random assembly deciding the agenda. It's like, oh my God, how are they equals? You know what I mean? That those are the ones, really, those are the rulers. So all of that is not clarified. That's why it's hard to say what follows, because of course we have never seen a autocracy in practice and we don't know. And whatever we say, they will say, oh no, we'll find some other way of fixing it, you know. But if you think about it, it becomes less and less attractive for all the reasons that you mentioned. Yeah.
Moy and please say your name and where you come from, so that.
You have to appear here, in front of you. No, just in front of you.
The big thing, that thing.
Ah, okay.
I'm sorry, this is a different one.
The assumption of the
We thought they were all the same.
My name is Moises Vaca. I'm a researcher here at UNAM in the Institute of Philosophy. And it's very nice to see you again here, Cristina. My first question is, when you call this book The Lotocracy Mentality, what I would like to ask is, how big is this challenge to democracy really? It sounds like the fascists are coming, or you know, like the libertarians are around. What is going on in the U.S. to write a book on lotocrats right now? No? We know Guerrero and Claudio Lopez Guerra, a good friend of ours, at some point also defended this kind of thing. But it wasn't really, at least to my eyes, something, with all the challenges we're confronting to democracy, as you were mentioning at the beginning, these lotocrats, I mean, at least not in this context, in the Latin American context yet, especially in Mexico. In Mexico, the only discussion with lotteries, well, there are some, but one that is ongoing is in education, and whether students should be randomly selected for high school or things like that. And that's pretty much it. Or we can discuss whether in the in the judiciary there were some lotteries to allocate candidacies. So that's my first question: whether is it really like a massive challenge to democracy to talk about a mentality that it's affecting it?
I like that.
Yeah. Let me say, because we get that question a lot, and personally, I don't know if Nadia will agree. The problem are not the lotocrats. Obviously, as always, like culture always comes later, especially philosophers always come later, way too late. No, the movement is really on the ground. It may not be in Mexico. I always like when I used to write on religion and politics, I learned you absolutely have to look and see what's happening in the country you get invited to, because the issues are so different. It's like, oh my God, you can't say something without knowing. So we should do the same with citizens' assemblies, but I haven't had the time, and I don't know if there is a movement in Mexico, although I'm pretty sure there is, but probably it's not as big from what you say. I suppose hasn't reached that level. But if you just Google citizens' assemblies and see what's going on at all levels in Europe, absolutely. I mean, we participate in a discussion about creating a permanent citizens' assembly in Europe, because Europe is the place where the lotocratic mentality has the most choice. The other gigantic movement is on climate change. Right now in the COP30, I have a student who went to my seminar on lotocracy and thought that was a very weird thing, and now he's getting and he's writing to me, you won't imagine the German section of the COP is saying that we need citizens' assemblies and that it has to be by lottery, etc. That's how we handle climate change. And I was like, I told you so, you just don't know yet. Because the movement is not known to everyone. By that time, the fascists are coming. I mean, when everybody, like people like us, all know about it, this is way too late. But the real movement is happening really on the ground. And it's happening because of that need, and it's true, of a crisis of legitimacy and the need to increase participation. That is what is driving it in Europe. Very funny, driving it mostly in countries that have secessionist movements, and I have no idea about why. But like Scotland, I have been an expert witness for the Scottish Parliament 3 times already. They are absolutely into that. In Barcelona, in Belgium, all the countries, in Quebec, all places where there are secessionist movements, in Basque Land, in Spain. They are all driving this in terms of institutionalization politically. The other driver is really movements like Extinction Rebellion, etc., for climate change. Climate change is the place. I get asked all the time, already with my other book. We don't have time for democracy with climate change. We can't do democracy. We just have to get the outcome there. And I'm like, how on earth do you think you are getting an outcome? You need to change how people eat, the whole world, how they transport themselves, like what they do their whole life. How do you think you are going to change that? By convincing 200 persons in some room that this is what we need to do, and then you get all the billion people really actually becoming vegetarians? It's like, what are you talking about? How can you even believe that? But they believe that. They think the moment people see that citizens' assemblies, people like you say, you have to become a vegetarian, you do. It's like, try that. I mean, I can't believe it. But my motivation, as always, the culture, the scholars are reflecting that. When I wrote my first article against this movement in 2015, their reaction, I was astonished, was, this is a straw man. They don't exist. Like nobody believes that. 10 years later, I got a prize, a philosophy prize from the APA with the straw man, Guerrero and me, and I was like, you see, I told you they will come. He didn't exist at the time, but you know how it's philosophy. I mean, culture is processing these ideas. You know what I mean? And it just reflects a mentality that, of course, has not crystallized among everyone. By the time it crystallizes, we don't need to write the book. We need to go to the trenches, I think. It's way too late, right? But it is crystallizing. If you just Google millions of moments, they will tell you the exact same mantra. The mantras we have selected for each chapter is because I was like, if I read that another time, I'm going to throw up. It's like, I can't believe it. The same mantras, you will see it. And it's people who are not academics, are organizing citizens' assemblies. The whole mantra. The real democracy in Athens was sortition. I'm like, what? The next one, elections are aristocratic per essence. Intrinsically, elections cannot be egalitarians. You want people like you organize citizens' assemblies, they have to have binding power. They have to have legislative power. That is the new movement. You can find it everywhere. So it's true that it's probably not as bad as direct authoritarians, but we do think that what is special about the autocratic mentality, I mean, we call it mentality because we didn't want it to be too provocative. From my tradition of critical theory, I would have called it ideology, because what it is really is something that it looks extraordinarily democratic by comparison. That is why it's dangerous, in my view, because it does seem to be democratic. You cannot imagine the amount of people.
It's like the mushroom, yeah?
Absolutely, like amount of people who believe really that this is the way to go because it's democratic and not for other reasons, right? So we're trying to dismantle before it takes even more ground, but if it was really only an academic movement, I wouldn't waste my time. I don't like to hair split in an armchair. That's not what I do. But in Mongolia, already, in the constitution of Mongolia now, if you want to do a constitutional amendment, you have to do a derivative poll. This is already. So that's the tip of the iceberg. In Belgium also, you have those citizen assemblies. I mean, if you see already, it's taking shape. And there are two motivations. One is this. The other is that, in fact, we could do amazing things with citizens' assemblies if they let us organize it the way that is democratic, if let them be instruments for the citizenry to be involved rather than to exclude the citizenry. Imagine the reason for the legitimacy is that there is no participation in Europe, and then you want to have a permanent assembly that has nothing to do with the European citizens at all. How is that participatory? You know what I mean? So in that fight, I think is worth, because you don't come along very often with an institution that could possibly empower ordinary citizens. It's a very interesting thing. And if we waste it and it gets used in a kind of like rule of the few way that on top of it looks democratic and justifies and legitimizes the rule of the few, then we have lost twice over.
Add to that there is a technological innovation, because technology is very important here, because some young generations, they really think that elections belongs to a prehistory time in which there was no possibility of having strategies or technical devices in order to solve the problem of space and population. But with the internet or with artificial intelligence, you can do that without passing through the ordeal of electoral campaign and so on and so forth. So yes, it's considered to be, in some sense, a way of solving the problem, as if elections were a problem, because could not have been done differently. And the problem was space and masses. Of course, if you can solve these two problems with the technology, you are practically, you declare that elections are anachronistic. Right?
Gracias. Hi. My name is Pedro Martinez. I'm a professor at Universidad Iberoamericana here in Mexico City. Let me just start saying I'm not a autocrat, and I agree with most of your arguments. I just want to provoke on a couple of points, which I'm sure you address in the book, which I haven't fully read, so pardon me for that. So one point is this idea of agency, and I do agree that the autocratic mentality does drain agency from democracy, yes. But I guess the typical counter argument that you've for sure faced many times is, well, agency in democracy as we have it right now is anyhow overrated, because we all know that we're always choosing among the worst options. We're never satisfied with choices, and in any case, seeing what's happening in the US, it seems that agency is very prone to manipulation, right? Mm-hmm. And you have Donald Trump advocating or being voted by poor people in the US who are actually damaged by the policies that he is pushing forward, right? So it would seem that agency is somehow not so straightforward in democracy as it is, and therefore I would like to kind of hear your thoughts on the kind of the promises of lotocratism, in the sense of, well, maybe through having a lottery you reduce manipulation, right? Or I guess I'm sure you don't agree with this, but maybe it would be good to hear what you have to say about the good things that lotocracy could deliver, right? And the second question is, I am a professor of international law, and I can't think of one setting in which lotocracy could work much better than what we have now, which is the selection of members for the UN Security Council. And definitely the way the UN works has nothing to do with democracy within a country. But I guess my question would be, is there any setting in which we could think, or what are the conditions under which lotocracy could be a good idea? And I think the UN Security Council, could be one such setting. Thank you.
You want to start?
You want to collect?
Or we collect? Okay.
Hi. Well, I have the same disclaimer because I didn't read the whole book. But I liked the function you envisioned to mini publics as a way to overcome the problems of information, for example, in this moment of fake news, bad media, etc. And I liked also the function of intermediaries, but well, like, I think it is necessary to put together people and to advance discussions about political matters in this moment. But how do you think, or how you can maintain certain, I don't know how to express this, like a bottom-up participation in this kind of model of participation, because as you said before, you don't, who rule the mini public, who put the agenda, and how you can maintain certain autonomy within the mini public, because in some experience of participation in Latin America, for example, one of the problems I think was like in some places, like for example, we use Bolivia as an example always, we have previously social movements that are autonomous from the government, and then they push some agenda. But when the participation is put from the government or ask for the government, the function is more like a legitimation and not like a bottom-up thing. I don't know if it makes sense, the question. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Hanna Birkenkötter. I am also professor of international law at IIJM, and I also have the same disclaimer, I think. So Michaela asked me that she's also my colleague at IIJM in constitutional law. So I have the same disclaimer. I've read the introduction and the conclusion to your book, and I feel like I'm on board with the argument against lotocracy, but I do have a question about kind of like, okay, what follows for the preservation of elections? Because I believe that the lotocratic movement, as you describe it, and I'm from Europe myself, I'm from Germany, so I'm familiar with the debates that are taking place there, are some genuine issues with the way in which representative democracy is organized today. And I think one fundamental problem that we have in representative democracy, at least in Europe, and I think also in the US, is the way in which party politics work. And that representative democracy is organized through political parties that have this professionalization. Today in Germany, it becomes very difficult to get elected to the federal parliament if you're not a professional politician. And that is a kind of critique that many people voice, that these people, they've never had a real job in their life. I don't know what it means to have a real job. It's like, I'm a professor, so I have no idea what a real job means. But there seems to be this idea of, okay, like if you haven't built a house with your own hands, what right do you have to represent me in some political enterprise? And I do think that the professionalization of parties, the way in which parties are financed, the way in which you have to make a career as a professional politician are all dimensions of this debate. And I do think that there is a genuine issue of the way in which representative democracy is organized not actually being representative. I'm not sure of what exactly. And so I think that there lies some problem that I would like to hear your take on. And related to that is a question of, okay, what do you mean by ensuring equal political freedom? I would like to, because my understanding of your advocating for elections is that it's based on the fact that elections are a moment in which individuals can exercise political freedom, equal political freedom. That's like a moment of the exercise of of political freedom that we lose with a lotocratic mentality. But what are the conditions for this exercise to be a genuine exercise of political freedom? Because elections can be easily manipulated, and we see that in many places around the world. There is lots of information. Social media have misinformation campaigns. In some situations, you have bribes, you have financial incentives for voting. So how do you ensure that elections actually remain these, or under which conditions are elections, in fact, this kind of exercise of political freedom? And related to Pedro's question about the Security Council, I think that this is precisely why the Security Council election is not an election in the proper sense of the word, because it's an election of states by states. And there is, I think the underlying issue there is something that internationalists have. Sometimes they equate the state with an individual, which is problematic in its own right. But I think that is why the Security Council election wouldn't be an election in the sense that you're advocating for it, I believe. But yeah, so those are my two questions. Thank you.
I think we should handle them because it's like huge questions. I'm going to forget anything I want to say. You want to start?
No, good.
Okay, I'm going to go in order.
Agency.
I have so many things, yes.
Reducing manipulation.
Okay, how do we see agency in elections compared to lotocracy? We are not, like, we have been accused that we think of lotocracy in the worst possible situation, and then we think of elections ideally. I don't think of elections ideally, period, in any way, shape, or form. I grew up in a dictatorship. We did not have elections. When I was 18, I was able to vote. We had a military coup. And it took a lot to get elections as bad as they are. And to me, they have extraordinary value as bad as they are. So I'm not talking about ideal elections, whatever that could be. I'm talking about real elections. And so our claim about how we exercise political freedom in elections is, as elections are, my claim is we never fail to exercise political freedom in elections collectively as equals, as bad as they are. And of course, we need to improve them and we need to avoid all the perversions. I mean, no question. But what is the contrast? What is the alternative? That is how I make it be ideal enough. Because the contrast is so clear in my mind, I have no doubts that non-ideal as it is, we have the following choices. So my view of how we exercise agency, collective political freedom as equals is because we have one person, one vote. And what we do is not that I vote individually and I vote for a person that has a proper name. I mean, that view for money, to me, is like it must be from another world. I have never seen anybody voting like that. I think we vote for parties. We're in party democracies. And so the way we exercise collective freedom is by shaping the political space of the country with the very bad choices we had, those very bad options of parties that we really, really don't like. But we do that. We shape the political space based on how much we like which one, how much we avoid the other one, who likes which one, and we end up like in election night with the famous round where you see the cheese divided. That's what we did collectively as equals. We decided that much power for the Social Democratic Party, that much power for the Right Party, that much power for the Green Party. We decided that that reflects our exercise of collective freedom. It's not very good. I wish we had better options. That has a lot to do with the question of the problem of representation. Parties are failing because they do not have feasible political programs that people think are going to solve their problems. But this is a substantive issue, and I'm not sure who is to blame for that. We do not have an alternative to neoliberalism ready, as the neoliberals had one when Keynesianism came down. They had it ready, perfect. They took it. Thatcher took it, Reagan took it. When neoliberalism collapsed, where was the alternative ready there? Whose failure is that? I don't know. To me, that is the real problem. But it has nothing to do with elections. Still, imagine we are stuck with a situation where we don't know how to move forward. We don't know how to do a global economy in a different way than neoliberalism while we don't have the ability democratically even or in any other way to shape political action transnationally. We don't have that. So parties can promise whatever they want, the problem exists, and they can say anything they want, they can't solve the problem. Fine. So that's my analysis, as you want to know, that's what I believe. But regardless, in any moment in history, sometimes we are in a better position, parties have many options, sometimes we are much worse. We do that. Given the choices, not so good, but you know, the ones we got, we decide the shape of the political space, and it's just for 4 years, and next time around we don't like the results, we didn't know why, but we didn't know anything, but basically no, we don't like it, we shape it differently. And then those who we have elected have to fight it out, have to find a way that represents the fights that we will have if we were to do it. We just cannot do it 300 million people, but if we had to do it, we will have the exact same problem, that many people will actually prefer to go green, and that many people do not think we should go green. And the other, right? Okay, we do that. What is the alternative? Either we all do it collectively as equals, or the few, some do it. It's either all, or some, or one. There is nothing in between. And so I rather prefer extraordinarily non-ideal that we all do it collectively as equals and we change it as we see fit every 4 years. Then in China, you have socialism with Chinese characteristics. That is the agenda. You like it, you don't like it. That is the agenda. Chinese citizens have no way to say no, but actually I would like to try neoliberalism, or I would like to try green or social democracy, or who knows. They just don't get to choose. Okay. To me, that is the real alternative. And the lotocratic that hasn't told me how to shape the agenda, which is that shaping that we do, collectively in the night of election becomes very clear. That's what we all look to. We don't look at John Smith and whatever the name is. We look at it literally. What is it going to look like in the assembly? How many people from which party? Oh my God. Because it matters. Even if your party loses, you are exercising freedom because it matters a lot for how much. If it's for a lot, not a lot is going to happen from the party in the majority. We know that. So it matters no matter whether you lose or not lose. You just shape it. We did it collectively. In a autocracy, I suppose that the few, either one assembly or many or I don't know what, will make those choices. And then when we don't like the results, too bad, you know. There's nothing you can say. You wait, but you wait forever because it's like you cannot hold them accountable because they are a proxy of you. They are you. They are the, as I call them in my other book, the ultimate usurpers. They are exactly, it's not like they are constituent power. It's like you can't protest. It's as if you protest because you don't like what people in France chose. Too bad, you are not in France. So the French people choose that, right? So that's the situation we will be with regard to autocracy. What is good autocracy for? I think it can be good for many things. In my view, it's two things. What citizens' assemblies, not autocracy, but what citizens' assemblies are interesting about is that they can do two things. One, they can be in some sense impartial, means that in principle and very limited, if they have a lot of power, they won't, because they will be captured like any powerful actor. The reason why citizens' assemblies have been very nice so far is because they have no power. Nobody wants to capture them because why would you do that if they are not going to decide anything? That's a reason for not doing the way citizens' assemblies are being done these days, but I have a different solution for that. But in any event, they can be within limits, kind of impartial in that sense, that they don't have an agenda. Because they have been randomly selected, they want whatever they think is good for the country. Let's assume that that could be one feature. The feature that I like the most is not that one. What they can do, if you have a relatively diverse, relatively representative sample, without making too much out of it, because for me they are not the constituent power, then it doesn't matter so much how exactly they represent us. But basically, if you have a diverse sample that really represents the very different views that there are in society, they are very good at filtering the reasons and the values and the problems that resonate. Like what they have shown again and again, you manipulate public opinion by repeating something a million times. The second they organize a citizens' assembly, that thing falls out of the way. Nobody believes that's the issue. The moment they get minimally informed, nobody cares about that. That has been shown again and again, right? So they are very good at filtering and making highlighting what resonates with the people, literally, but not in one homogeneous way, the view of the people, no, the opposite, but what resonates, like what reasons are the ones that they care about, and what are the ones that you hear again and again, and nobody cares about them once they get informed. That is extraordinarily informative for us. You have not gone through that, you know nothing about, in Japan, privatizing pensions. Okay, there was 70% in favor of privatizing pensions in the polling of the population in Japan, right? They organized a derivative poll. Guess what? It goes from 70-something% in favor to 27% in favor in the assembly, right? Against privatizing pensions. Was the second they understood the risk was put on your shoulders, whether you have a pension or not. The second they understood that, it dropped. Okay, they can write a pamphlet saying, look, do you understand that this is what's going to happen? So for people outside, what they can do for us that we cannot do ourselves is to show us what matters the most, what is at stake for people like us, very different people, right? Different things are at stake, and what are the best reasons for and against it. To me, that's what they do as good as anything that has ever been invented. It's not perfect, but it's extraordinary. If we were to know how citizens' assemblies work and that they can do that for us, that's perfect. You want to know what the people who disagree with you think it matters and what the problem is that they have. That gives you a chance to think, wait a second, right? Because in my self-interest, maybe I want this, right? But I understand now what is at stake for them, for the handicapped people, for the women, for the young people, for who knows what. You get to understand their problems. And that may change your mind about what you should do because we are doing it collectively, it's not for myself. So those to me are the extraordinary virtues. That's why I care about citizens' assemblies. I think they can do things for us. Otherwise, I would not also dedicate a book of something I don't believe at all. I won't ever write a book against Jason Brennan. This is not going to happen in a million years. It has to be something that is valuable, and it just depends on how you use it, whether you lose the value or not, right? Now, the UN Security Council, oh my God, you guys tell me, you are the international relations, because when I teach human rights, because it's that other thing I do that has nothing to do with this book, in my other line of business on human rights, when I teach, a lot of people come to me, students, with a question about the Security Council not being legitimate and how it could be done in some way or another, or the General Assembly could choose the members. And I always try to explain to them that the Security Council is not a legislature, and that it makes not a lot of sense to think that parties to the Council who will have to deliver on their military, their personnel, they put at risk their soldiers, etc., could be outdone by someone else who is not risking anything. Like, you put some people in the Security Council and says, yes, we have to intervene, I don't know, in X country. And then the countries that do have to actually do it and use the word are kind of like, really, well, you do it, right? So to me, the Security Council has to in some way reflect the willingness to intervene, use military if necessary, use your personnel, risk the lives of your, and it cannot be democratic in the sense of, I would love to, do this, but I'm not risking anything, my country has no weapons, has no, So for that reason, I don't know how it makes a lot of sense to think that you can go very far away in the Security Council from the fact of who is willing to do the job for the resolution at issue, that typically will be controversial, it will be problematic, we will have to do things. Some others may not, but the ones that are such that military force may be necessary, to me, the good thing about the Security Council is that if they get to agree, it's going to happen. If you get a council that is beautiful, get to agree, but still the last mile is actually who is going to say, and that one is not resolved, then that council doesn't do anything. I don't know, this is a completely different topic, but I would like to know what you think. I think that's, if it's only for a little membership, but I don't think you could exclude the ones that matters militarily, right? You may just have a plutocracy about choosing the members that don't matter, I don't know, in that regard, but you couldn't imagine a Security Council that does not have the United States, China, Russia, like the nuclear powers, then what is that? I don't know. So that's why I have never thought of using plutocracy there. But there are many places where I would use it. But basically, I would not use it to give them decision-making power. So there has been a long discussion for constitutionalists about having a citizen assembly actually either replacing Supreme Court judges, playing the role of the Supreme Court judges themselves, or working with Supreme Court judges. In my other book, I argue that it could be that it could add something to that process, but this is not a democratic process in any relevant sense. It's meant to be an impartial process, right? That's what it should be. The judicial branch should be impartial, not democratic. And to the extent that these mini publics are not democratic in any interesting way, it could be that adding them or not adding them could add impartiality for some particular design. And so I'm open to that use in which they will have decision-making power, but that's not legislation. That is really application of the law, whatever we make of the distinction. Okay, I answered this and you answered the others or something because I was speaking for so long.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Well, maybe the top-down, bottom-up, and then you answer all the ones you want. Or
perhaps other people want to say something.
Yeah.
To intervene, and because I have something on representation, but then if you want to open the floor again, and then I'll come back later because. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, professors, to bring on the table a topic that allows us to think about representations in a time of crisis. For example, in my country, in Spain, today it's the 50th anniversary of the death of the dictator, but the data shows that 25% of young people think or believe that autocracy is good. Sometimes it's better than democracy. So this, first of all. My question is very related with the question that has been bring up by Rodrigo and by Hannah. 100 years ago, a German scholar, Kelsen, told us that democracy cannot survive without parties, but today we have a problem with parties because they are not properly accomplishing their constitutional role. And we see how everywhere the polarizations favor that parties select government positions or high civil service positions based on loyalty reasons, but not in public virtues, we can say. So you have told about how plutocracy when it's proposed as a substitute of representative democracy, it's not a good thing. But Professor Urbinati tell that in some cases can be auxiliary to democracy, to representative democracy. And I don't know if in the book there are some examples, because I think that it can have like a combination with. It's not good, for example, to select the full chamber, but maybe among a chamber elected by the people, it can be good that some cabinet positions, the Attorney General, for example, in the US, is better to take the chances.
General, I agree with you. All the judges should not be elected to begin with. I'm sorry.
So maybe sometimes chances are better than choices.
Yeah.
In
yes.
In Spain, I don't know if you know about the example, but in order to elect the Council of the Judiciary, you need a super majority in Parliament. For 5 years, the parties were unable to reach this super majority. So some academics, to put pressure on political parties, propose to put in the law, if parties don't reach supermajority, judges will be elected by lottery mechanism. So sometimes maybe lottery can correct this.
May I ask a question before you go? Supermajority to do what?
To elect the members of the Council of the Judiciary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but if parties are not able to accomplish their constitutional role, maybe we have to put pressure on them. I don't know.
Actually agree with that type of proposal.
Chifta y David.
See, I am also interested in the last chapter of the book where you analyze the possibly auxiliary and merely auxiliary role that others have been also interested. I thought that one of the, now Cristina, you insisted on the impartiality and on the capacity of giving more information and filtering the reasons. But I was thinking that maybe another argument of this combination would be that imagine if we actually do this and we invest a lot of time as citizens in coming up with these fantastic ideas. But then we don't decide, because I agree with you that we will have this and it's not replaceable. But then you would have a court-circuited of this wonderful thing when it goes to these horrible representatives that we actually do. So what I thought is that this would create the will to make the actual the political parties accountable, that it could be an it would be another instrumental benefit. Yeah. That you would have a very motivated people, the ones that have been in the mini public, looking into representative politics and then contributing to improve the political parties in the parliament. And the second comment is also about what benefits can come from sortition in other spaces as well. Our colleagues were talking about the Naciones Unidas. And I was thinking about here in Mexico, we have a sortition for the administering of elections. I mean, the people that go, that are in the election stations are selected. And I think it is an extraordinary way of creating equality, citizenship, I don't know, something very positive. I've been there. But especially this is important in societies that are very segregated, like Latin American ones, where people don't meet in the schools, don't meet in the hospitals, don't meet in the entertainment. So don't meet in the neighborhoods, of course. So in my experience, the wonder of this thing is that you really meet anyone. I mean, it could even be more diverse. And I think also another example of this is jury duty, probably in the States, right? Where you
that's the model.
You interact. I don't know, the positivity that I have extracted from these experiences. So maybe I agree with you, but maybe we could have like spaces different from those you mainly focus, and benefits could come from that for equality, for things.
If you want, you can answer these two.
Yeah,
and
may
then
I
we
do
will
so?
take
Yeah.
other two.
Okay. Yeah, I start from this one, the U, because it's exactly what lottery should do, because lottery is connected to random selection possibilities and impartiality, not segregation, which are party segregations, also faction segregations, right? So it's very important, and indeed, just to be a little bit precise, one of the first moments in which selections by lot became important in the US, but also in Germany, I think it's by some historians, is precisely when they have to denounce the underrepresentation of minorities within jury duty assemblies. So the question is relevant. But again, jury duty, right? So all activities that have to do with stimulating the attention to one issue, or simply making the representatives understand what people think on these issues. Well, it's not people think all of them, but still we recognize that there is some important sample of us who have the ability of making this argument. Yes, this is what is important for me, is to make the distinction between decisions auxiliary to decisions, and thus I wouldn't put lottery as a way of amending that kind of. Why so? Because think about an assembly of some authors proposes this assembly, the parliament made of two assemblies, one of the two by lottery, the other by elections. The outcome, and there's been some kind of experiments on that, is the outcome is paradoxical. You give more power to the elected assembly, because the elected assembly is organized according to issues, topics, division of labor. They know the proposed, they know everything, but the other assembly is not supposed to do that and to be organized, so doesn't have power to input. And thus the paradox is that you create a monocameralism by giving power to the elected to side power over the non-elected but the sorted. So be careful not to consider the two as one cooperating on the same level with another one. I would say so. Parties are in problem. Yes, this is the problem of democracy. The problem of democracy today, in my view, is that parties are doing the work that are not completely supposed to do, or better say, they don't do the whole job they are so supposed to do. The job is to organize opinions and to organize proposals inside of society. That's to connect, not to individuals. Parties don't connect to us individually. They connect to organize interests or opinions, and thus civil associations, organizations of interest. This is what is the problem with democracy. In my view, thus, the crisis of party reflects a problem inside of democratic societies, not simply political. So think about, I don't know, Mexico, but in many other countries, and for the first time in my life I tried to be empirical, and so I went to see, to check data and numbers. Yes, there is a trend everywhere you are, in the Europe, also the States, that there is a part of society, not all society, a part of society that is very well organized in their own interest, in their representation. Think about the professionals, think about people like us, right? We have many connections and thus many possibility of claiming for representation. There is another part of society, generally don't go to vote because they don't feel to have any kind of these correlations. So the problem thus has to do with the intermediation moment. So why we think that it's possible to solve this problem by transferring power from one way of selecting to another one? The problem is another one. It has to do with the reorganizations of democracy, indeed. So assuming that elections is not simply putting our ballot somewhere or one day, but is it creates a lot of institutions connected to elections. And this is what today, in my view at least, is the real issue of democracy. Democracy has this problem, and thus is a democracy of the 50% somehow. Those who are more integrated, more connected to parties, and the parties do another job. The party do the job of the machinery of selections, but sometimes they don't even make the machinery of selections of the candidates, which come from elsewhere, from the financial system, from the business of the lawyers, of medical issues. So there are corporate societies are capable of being represented much more than ordinary people, ordinary citizens. That is an issue today. Now, is possible with the sortition? Perhaps sortition can do a lot in controlling, containing, introducing some elements inside of the party system. And in this case, they can produce something good. But again, it's not the solution to the problem, right? It is part of the problem, if you want to say so. Thank you.
Gracias. My name is David Peña. I'm a professor at CIDE, and I'm also coming at this from the philosophy side. So in that sense, I want to channel here Professor Herrera and then maybe ask you to respond. So I think one thing that's striking about at least the introduction is that you frame the objection against autocracy, at least in part, as an objection against its lack of accountability. But that's, of course, what Guerrero insists is so bad about representative democracy. The argument he has in mind seems to go something like this. He says, listen, in order to have accountability, you need to know a lot of things. You need to know what your representative is up to, who she is, how she voted, and then on top of that, you need to have your own conclusion about what the right thing to do in that case is. And then he says, of course, nobody can do that. We cannot do that individually or collectively. And because there really is no way of holding representatives accountable, what we should aim for then is minimizing the risk of having bad representatives. And of course, he thinks autocracy does this, or at least does it better than democracy. So I guess the question for you is, at which point do you think the argument goes wrong? There are maybe conceptual premises here about what accountability is about. There are empirical premises about what we need to know in order to hold representatives accountable. And then there's, of course, the normative premise that this is what we should be doing, minimizing risk.
Good morning. I'm Paulina Herrera. I'm a researcher here. I also come from law and philosophy, political philosophy. I was trying to look at the segment you sent us just now to find some insight of David's question, because I think mine is related. It's related and complementary to some that have already been asked, but I would like for you to expand on some issues, especially the dilemma accountability versus agency that also Pedro used to put forth. Sorry, I'm not also I adhere to their disclaimers. I'm not a autocratist. And I only read the segment that you sent us.
Illegal.
Please,
you don't go to jail.
I can sign whatever you want. But I was thinking on arguments. I admit, as Professor Lafont said, that the first time I heard about it, about people like proposing autocracy was during the pandemic, and I found it really odd. It was at an LSE seminar, and it was very, very strange. And I thought that it might have something to do with my classical political theory, not upbringing, but background. But if we're thinking on arguments in favor of the autocratic mentality, we might think that the fact that we are equally allowed to be part of the lot that it's been sorted out would be the most transparent and accountable way to participate in political decisions. If we are criticizing, for example, or we're criticizing the representative democracy because of all the issues we have with parties, and we're criticizing representative elections and democracy because you cited Manan at the beginning, no? Because there's some this disregard and distrust to mediated institutions. To some extent, there's some worth in the equating accountability with luck, no, or transparency with luck. With it's evident since the beginning, and I would like to hear your answer and your response to that, because I think that's a very tough argument to beat if we are to take into consideration all the other, or at least the very real criticism that exists to our democracies as we know them, and I know that they're not perfect. And in the same line, I would I would love if you would expand a little on the compatibility of lotocracy and technocracy, because I find that argument is super interesting. And coming from Mexico and the background that Andrea just gave us, like we are of course thinking of the election of the judiciary, because for the last year and a half, that's the only thing that we've been talking about. And I heard some arguments in all of the discussions on how lotocracy might not be as evil or as counterproductive if we mediated through, if we select candidates in some other way previous to the sortition. So in that sense, the relationship with technocracy, I find it really interesting and compelling. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that. And the last thing, sorry.
No, que ya.
Oh, sorry. The last question I wanted to ask was is related also to the sensation that Moises said when he asked his question. I was reading the segment that you sent, and I kept thinking about how to relate these problems that you talk about in the book with what I believe is one of the most pressing issues in our time, which is the strengthening of the far right in our countries. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that about as well. Thank you.
Maybe I'll give you, because it's a lot, and then we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let me go to the accountability arguments that Alex provide. I mean, I will say two things. First, accountability is overrated for the purposes of judging the relationship between citizens and the elected representatives. And so it's not my choice. But given that is a lot of people's choice, and of course there is a dimension of accountability, but I think it's the wrong way of understanding our relationship. Of course, unless it's legal accountability. Like if somebody is taking bribes, then the law should take care of it. So that sense of legal accountability is fine. But my relationship to my representatives is not necessary. So the problem we are having now, or even in general, has never been that representatives don't have incentives to do what the party said it would do. They have plenty of those. So the problem is not that once we elect them, they can keep doing things that are random and we are astonished how they don't do what they said. Trump is doing exactly what he said. That's exactly the problem. Okay, so we don't have that problem. The thing is, if we are in the majority and we elected the party will deliver to some extent or another. So political accountability is not obvious to me because it's not the main issue. You have more the problem, of course, individuals who may be bribed. That's the model, actually. But still, I will say, he says that there is lack of accountability because you don't know what your representative is doing. This is this individualized view of individuals. I don't know what Pepito is doing. Of course, I don't. At most, I know what the party is doing that I would like to choose next time and this time. And I hold the party accountable to the extent of two things. One, what they did basically roughly to the extent that it could with all the others, because the opposition are citizens like me. It's not that, hey, the party didn't do what I want. It's like, who are you? Like the rest of the people didn't want that. So of course your party didn't even win. But did it go a good opposition, as good as possible for people like me who wanted this? Okay, if you put it in those terms, okay, one dimension is whether it's delivering to the extent that it is possible, and the other is whether it's actually working, whether what is delivering works. And I think most people vote on that one. That is the kind of accountability. You promise the economy will be better, but it isn't. Is it because you did something wrong and you were bribed? No, it's because your program actually did not work. So trickle down didn't trickle down, that's just a fact. So now I'm gonna go for the next party. That's how I see accountability, and we do it absolutely perfectly. We never fail in doing that. We don't like the economy, we don't like how we can affect it, we choose another party. May not do better, but so what? We are the constituent power, like we choose, just maybe we're lucky with the next guy. That's how I see accountability. That's not exactly how Guerrero says it, where I need to know exactly what some person did, and I have no way to know how it bear out. That is making accountability so high that, of course, everything on earth fails. So that's the problem I see. In any event, my real argument against Guerrero, that he doesn't really answer in any way, shape, or form, is imagine accountability goes very bad in whichever way is your favorite. So some accountability is bad. So now think non-accountability. Necessarily none is worse than some. That's my argument. Having some accountability, we can have a discussion here. How well is working? To what extent? Party discipline is working? Maybe not. So we have a lot of mechanisms of accountability, and they don't work perfect. Non-accountability is a different matter. And to me, that will have to be justified. It's not by making accountability so impossible that then you think losing it has no price. It does. Non-accountability is Xi Jinping in China. Okay? Does it make a difference or not? To me, all the difference in the world. So I prefer some. But it's true that accountability is the wrong horse to be racing on. The real horse is we decided which parties we go for. We see what they do, we like it or not, next time we change it. Some people were randomly selected, we don't like what they did, too bad. What do you do next time or that time? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. You can only blindly defer.
And obey.
So blindly defer is much worse than some accountability, however weak. That's kind of our argument. And then in empirical terms, of course, we also argue against the idea that a autocratic system will work better against capture and all the problems of accountability, that of course, a system with no accountability is so much easier to capture than one with some. I mean, come on. Obviously, but that isn't our argument. Landa and Pevnik had made the argument to somehow in practice, it will be so much easier to capture someone who had the lack of his or her life of being selected and is going to have the right of his life when he's out of the assembly by being captured by everyone affected in the corporate world, right? How do you prevent that? If you cannot prevent it with politicians, why would you prevent it with a single person who has zero accountability? Nothing, right? So the idea that, in fact, it will be less capturable is not very credible, but okay, so that's
May I add
one.
something on that issue?
Yes.
I think that the usage of the word accountability comes within political science at a certain point of the 60s, when they have to justify the way in which parties promise, and then after 4 years they go back to the electorate. Now, they use an argument or a terminology that is totally impolitical. This is terminology of justice, of juridical. And indeed, as Kelsen said, if we want to use it for representation, well, representation is not there, either accountability or political representation in some sense. Because accountability presumes that you choose your lawyer, defending your interests, and you can try to control, I don't know, because you don't know everything that he does or she does, so you trust based on fact, some, in some sense. But in the case of democracy, policy doesn't work in its way in any case. It's not that the domain. So there are two others terms we should use, and we don't use. I don't know why. Responsiveness and responsibility. These are the two words in political representation. Responsiveness in relation to my party and my decision to choose this party. Party should be responsive to me. And if party is strong, is capable of making the elected responsive. Otherwise, if the party is strong, the elected are totally free to do what they want. They change parties, they go from one to another one, and responsiveness is over. And the other one is, responsibility is over. The other one is responsiveness. And responsiveness, again, implies that there is a correlation between the citizen and the institution or the parties, which are very important. And as Kelsen said, rightly so, strong party, strong democracy. Why? Because parties can do what democracy representation cannot do. Democratic representation cannot have imperative mandate by law. Parties is a way of substituting for this absence. Because if parties are strong, they impose a mandate to their own elected. But if they are not strong, there is no mandate at all, and these party members are simply from themselves. They are really individuals. So I think we have to be more precise in using terminology in relation to representative democracy and party democracy in order also to solve the problem. Banally, it's a quasi banality, but it's true. So in some sense, I don't know what is bad representatives. You know, it's complicated. Unless you don't want to have tell us what is the ideal representative in relation to which a bad representative is the one that doesn't have responsibility, doesn't feel that she has responsibility and responsiveness. But then you have to define what is the actor. The actor is not the individual candidate. It is the party in relation to which the individual candidate operates. Because at that point, I can use the word responsiveness and responsibility. Okay.
I may want to say something about the auxiliary use, because there were many questions. And so a little bit about how we imagine how to avoid the problem of top-down citizens' assemblies. So the problem with all the assemblies that have ever happened so far is that they most have been top-down. There was a proposal by the Green Party in Belgium to make it bottom-up, and it failed in Parliament, obviously. It was switching power to other places, and obviously that's a hard battle anyway. But so there has never been one that is not top-down. There have been many that are independent, like for empirical studies by scholars or something that have no power. And the problem with top-down, like famous citizens' assemblies from Macron, right? Macron thought, oh my God, I have all these demonstrations on the street with the yellow belts. Okay, I'm going to blame it on the citizens. So I organize a citizen assembly, and they make the tough decisions, and it's the people. And so once it's the people, it's not me. The people, interestingly enough, that's why these assemblies are so interesting, came up with completely new ideas. They think outside the box. That's the thing. That's why it's interesting that it's different people. So they came up with completely different ideas than what Macron was imagining, unfortunately. Much better ideas. Right, and so the Macron ignored them. That has been the norm. Why can they ignore what citizen assemblies recommend? Because they have no power. That's what the organizers. That's what is driving the organizers to the autocratic mentality. Is the idea that if the assemblies have no power, they can make no impact. Why would you waste millions of dollars and the time and the efforts of citizens really that have a life to write? Why would you do that for nothing? Just to get this window dressing apparency of legitimacy is like no. So that question is how much power they should have is driven by the fact that you can't possibly, they will keep saying me like, if you don't want them to have power, why are you not in favor of just not having them at all? It's like, you don't have power, you don't have impact. You must be, like all of us, in the business of trying to increase their power so that they actually make a difference. Why would you do that? Okay. I came to the conclusion that this is the wrong question. If you keep asking how much power, there is no way to stop. There's no place that is in equilibrium. Because once somebody decided the issue, what has happened a lot, is that the issue is some aspect of climate change, let's say. And then this is the menu of options that the public authority can actually implement for, right? So people get together, they are the constituent power, they come up with the idea like, no, but actually that's not solving the problem at all. Imagine it's transportation in your city, and you want to make it more green or something, and those are the forces. They come to the idea that actually what we need is to have more revenue. We need more taxes, that we will pay for this thing, and that it will be the actual solution. Oh, but then the public authority says, we don't have authority over taxes like that. What are you talking about? This is the assembly at the municipal level, like we can do that. So how do you solve that problem? Well, the way we ended up with parliaments that have sovereign powers, you know what I mean? Like, what you need is that they have the power not only to choose in the menu, but actually to decide what are the issues that they should be, what are the options, okay? So you increase their power, there is no place to end other than sovereign powers. That's why we have parliaments that have sovereign powers, that they decide what to decide, right? The competence. Okay, so there is no place to stop. And then you end up being a autocrat. That's why I knew autocrats will come. It doesn't matter how many, who cares? In a philosophy, who cares how many? The question is that position has been created and somebody will go through it and draw the consequences. And Guerrero did, and excellently. He does it best than any other because he's the most consequent of all. Helen is trying to keep it both ways and you can have it. So philosophers are very good at being consistent. That's the thing I think we are good about. It's only that. But then you commit suicide. That's right. I just wanted to say it immediately. Yes, but that's what we do. We speculate with we are brains in a vat. What do you expect from us?
No.
Okay. In any event, so if you ask that question, how much power? There is no answer that is satisfactory. So I think we have to change the question. The question was originally that this was going to be increasing participation, remember? In the autocracy, they already decided, Helen, very clearly, all of them, is representation, it's not participation. You have 20 people, that's not participation, okay? We are 20 million, say, right? 20 people are not participatory. Okay, so remember participation, we wanted to empower citizens more than they are right now because they feel disempowered. That's the political alienation they feel with representative democracy, okay? So remember, the question was, therefore, not how much power we give to the few, but who is to be empowered? If you ask that question, we were thinking of empowering the citizenry. Okay, how can we use mini-publics for that?
Exactly.
Okay, the examples are citizens' initiatives. Social movements who do exist and are organized and want something, Extinction Rebellion, whoever you want, have something to put in the agenda, okay? The problem is with initiatives in Europe, for example, you need 8 million signatures, which still is not representative, right? But who on earth can gather 8 million signatures? You need to have a lot of money. Who puts initiatives in the United States? Those who have money to gather signatures, obviously. Okay. If you have tons of citizens' assemblies, you can organize as many as you want, and they are expensive, but not that expensive, then you lower the level of signatures. By that, you are lowering the value of the initiative. Maybe a bunch of people want the wildest thing that nobody wants. So maybe once you go through the initiative and the Citizen Assembly revise it and tries to improve it, if they rank initiatives by urgency or by importance, maybe yours gets down because it doesn't really convince a majority of the people of that diverse group that this is the best initiative on earth, right? So in my view, if we did that, if we were able to get initiatives through a channel that we can trust, and I think we can trust them, not as legislators, but as kind of like people like us. Yes, we can trust them that they can look at the initiatives and come up with the best arguments in favor or against. This is a model in Oregon. The Citizen Initiative Review in Oregon already exists, has been running for years, now it's not happening, but to me it's the perfect model. You have initiatives at the state level that people have to vote on. In fact, you have it in your ballot, and then the jury, in that case, the model is the jury, you have a pamphlet written by them saying what is at stake, what are the best, most important reasons in favor, and the most important reasons against. They are not legislating for you. They are not getting a majority. They are telling you what matters. That's the auxiliary, perfect. Yeah. That's, for us, the kind of thing we cannot do. But the main thing we cannot do is to know what matters to the people we disagree with, because Mexico is segregated. Look at the United States, okay? Do you ever meet anyone that is not exactly like you, ever? I have never met one. I bought my house exactly what I was supposed to buy. I cannot even believe it to this day because I didn't know what I was doing. Guess what? I bought the house exactly. I'm neighbor to all my colleagues. It's like, really? I didn't even know where I was. So, okay, for that reason, we know nothing about what matters to others. Nothing at all, right? That many publics do in an amazing way. So they could do that for us. And then I guess, for things that are very controversial, if you have to have, for example, a referendum, even if it's local or whatever, if people vote for it, they won't vote for it because they are controversial and people don't like it. And you lower the signatures, guess what? Probably people don't like it. Okay, so it may not make a difference at the beginning. But I do believe that the reason why there is so much political alienation and people are so pissed off that the politicians are not responsive, right? Because of responsiveness being the problem, there are tons of issues in every country that has something like an 80% of people in favor and never made it through the legislature, either because there is gridlock, because there is capture, whatever the case it is.
The will of the people is called.
No, but literally, but that's what makes them so angry.
Exactly.
They are angry because they know for a fact that 80% wants that and still cannot get done. That is what makes people frustrated. Those issues in this model will go through because this is bottom up. The agenda is being set by the initiatives, and the Citizen Assembly is not coming up with ideas. No, the ideas are coming from social movements, people who want things, right? And then still, you get the people to decide, in some cases, or it goes to Parliament. But imagine if that system existed like the jury exists, so that everybody knows what it is and is paying attention. Macron could get away with it because nobody knows what that is, and that's how you ignore it at no cost. If people know what it is, ignoring, as we know, is not so easy, especially issues 80% of people in favor.
Exactly.
Okay, we will get those through. And to me, the virtue of that is that it will mobilize people again. When parties don't know what programs we have, when they don't know how to organize the economy that is global and they cannot act globally, when you have a real structural problem, at least you can do some things that people do want, right?
They can help parties.
And that will help parties even to pick on the things that they clearly have support, etc. So that environment, creating this environment of those institutions could actually make a difference to the kinds of problems that we have exactly. And it's not a panacea, it's not the solution of anything. No, but that's something that parties are not very good to do right now.
And not even movement, because they do something that the movements don't do, because the movements show the problem.
Right, that most people don't agree.
Exactly, but the assemblies, they put the issues toward decisions. And thus they call for a decision. It's a kind of calling for. For this reason, can be very important also to revitalize parties, because parties have all the interest to look for issues coming from the people and to say, this is my issue also, because they know that there is a large majority of them waiting for. So I think it can be a very good strategy for giving a good answer to your questions concerning parties and so on and so forth. Right?
First of all, thank you for the book. It is very interesting, and for the discussion. While I was reading the book, I thought about the academic debate between Mansbridge and Reffeld from a decade ago, because what I find it is kind of a critique. My feeling is that you put attention on a second moment, not in the election, but in the exercise of power, and obviously on a third moment, the accountability moment. And for me, it is really well explained for the first two critics, the positions of the autocracy, when they try to substitute the democracy and to coexist. But in the third one, I was kind of shocked, because for me the third one is like okay, but you can go inside. And my feeling is that because you put attention on the first two critics on the second and third moment, the exercise of power and the accountability, and when you try to explain the instrumentary position of autocracy, you put more attention on the first moment, the election moment, and it is a matter of degree, and what kind of degree would it be to use these tools? Because for me, after the book, after reading the book, is like, why do you choose to let them? I think we are against or the argument, the autocracy mentality, but I am a Democrat, and for me it was shocking because the tool it is something that lacks debate, democratic debate, and all of them, as when they try to substitute or when it is auxiliary, for me, and in that sense, and you mentioned before, even there is zero accountability. So if there is zero accountability, why in some degree we let them in? Thank you.
Excellent question.
But
I want to say something.
Yeah, die.
Then I go. Okay. No, you are right. The thing is, for me, it's clear that any institution that has any impact at all will exercise some power. No question. But I'm happy with that. Like, independent agencies exercise a lot of power, and we still think we need them. And to the extent that they have power, really, they may lack accountability. They have not been elected. So I'm familiar with the non-ideal. And so, to me, the big difference is whether you have the power to legislate. That is what I was talking about. To impose binding decisions on everybody who is subject to them. I mean, that is the power I am rejecting. Clear. Do I want them to have some power, even more than other people are comfortable with? For example, I speculate with the possibility that they could rank, if they have tons of initiatives and it's done a few citizens' assemblies, they may want to rank them. Ranking them is setting the agenda, right? However, am I necessarily against it? Well, if things work the way I'm imagining, I'm not sure I will be against it for the following reason. First, the items have popular support because that's how they became citizens' initiatives, which are also expensive, require a lot of organization, I mean, clearly. So, okay, so the input is coming from civil society in many different ways. And the decision is not done by the mini public. It's either by the electoral institutions, the relevant ones, the administrative institutions, the parliament, whatever, depends on the type of issue, or even by referendum, ballot propositions, or the citizenry. So the decision moment is out, and the input moment is out. And then, can they do something? I think it won't be bad, because you want citizens' initiatives that have some chance of surviving, right? The citizen assembly members will be very easy to see what reasons are convincing. They really do mirror us in many ways. What is the point of having initiatives that are never going to make it? Is this a loss? Is this power? Yes, it is power, but to me it's not so in consonant with the way elections go and majority rule goes. You know what I mean? So why not? All my arguments, our arguments based on representation do not apply. Because in our model, they are not the constituent power in any way, shape, or form, period. Why? Because they don't legislate. Like, you need them to be the constituent power. They are going to legislate. They are not going to have to legislate. They are like any public agency that was even by people appointed. You know what I mean? They don't represent anything. They're just making decisions, right? Okay, so then that lowers a lot. I need to be descriptively representative, but the stakes are so low that anything that is minimally diverse is fine. Because typically they will pick on the kinds of things that resonate with the public debate, which, of course, with manipulation of public debates may not be so good. So I'm in the non-ideal territory. But that's why I think once they don't represent us as constituent power and once they don't legislate, which is two sides of the same coin, I'm willing for them to do this middle work. Why them and not independent judges? Well, because I do think they get us. They know what will resonate with us much better than, say, a group of judges that will not be descriptively representative, for example, right? So I think, but I'm not saying, for example, that it's unique, that we absolutely need auxiliary citizen assemblies. I don't think we need them, but why not using them in that moment where we kind of could have a use? That's kind of how I would
I would add to this, very important, of course, the following. Now, these assemblies, they have an authority, the authority of not being powerful. You know, they are not connected to interest, they are not they have an autorevolezza, an authority that is moral, that is ethical or whatever. And so it's very hard for a parliament, for parties to ignore them. For this reason, to have them in some presence, in some specific one, could be a good stimulus. Now, you think about the way in which the parliamentary committee were invented. They were not there. They were invented in the 19th century when social classes started proposing or, you know, pulling for their own interest, and they understood that the parliamentarians understood. In England, this happened. They have to take care of some issues that they never thought before, issues concerning society, regulations, and activities. So they didn't have expertise to do that. So they created assemblies, or internally to them, assemblies capable of dividing some labors, kind of, and that parliamentary committees were an important auxiliary support to the activity of the parliament. Today, they're too much, actually, because they do all the job, and the parliament simply say yes and no at the end, so that is an issue. But I think that this can be part of this transformative process that parliamentary democracy or representative democracy is capable of. Why not? Yes.
I forgot one thing, not reminded by what you said. One context where I think it will be also interesting is one of them, not the only one, is with gridlock. Many times there are decisions that no party wants to take because it creates problems. Blaming the people
this is what the judge will tell.
It allows parliamentarians to do it. It's exactly what Macron thought. It's just that they will have to do things in some cases when they like it, and in some cases
looking
when they
for
don't.
a tyrant, right? Looking for a tyrant.
But so in that way, it's really auxiliary. It's trying to help the electoral system to do what it's meant to do, but that often cannot do because of other aspects that we need. We need parties to be in the way they are, but because of the way they are and the discipline within the party, that helps not to capture individuals within the party because the party protects them. They have to decide. They have the same thing. For many reasons that may be very good, they cannot do some things. Well, this type of institution could help them do something we want to happen that they cannot have the incentives to do, right?
Authority means responsibility in this case, in the sense that parties don't want to take responsibility toward the election because they can lose, right? Or they can have some forms of countervailing action. So why not to use this? Yes, it's important. It's a way of actually they're auxiliary to parties more than they are auxiliary to institutions like parliament in themselves, in an indirect way. And they are even stronger in this case, in my view. But it's very hard to convince the parties that this they need. They have to be convinced that it's in their own interest. You know, selfishness, well understood. This is in their own interest to devolve some power somewhere else, authority more than power, and to have the ability of strengthening in their own power. So, but this needs to be done if they want to survive. And since parties are animals and all animals want to live and not to die, of course they have to find a way of survival. And I think that when they feel that there is in a situation of despair, they may find convenient to have this support, as they in past they did in other ways. Yeah. So yes.
Well, thank you very much to our guests, and thank you to all of you. I want to also thank Alfonso from ICON, Mika and Rodrigo from ITAM for all the help, Roberto from La Facultad de Derecho, who is not here, but is part of has been very helpful for organizing this. I want to thank Camilo for the support with the Línea de Estudios Empíricos del Derecho, and Natalia, who is no longer here, but she has been very important helping us with organizing, and to all the people that are working in projecting these to different media. So thank you very much for all your work, and thank you. And of course, there were some other questions, but I think we can continue the conversation having lunch, because otherwise we will eat a cold lunch. So thank you very much.